Come on, can you give God a good hand for that? Isn't that amazing, everybody? I love you guys so much. I love being a part of this church that loves to serve our city. What an amazing day yesterday was. Over 100 of us gathered together and we served at 4 different locations. We do this twice a year. Now we serve all throughout the year, but twice a year we do a serve day, a big one in the spring and then a smaller one in the fall. And you made a huge difference in the lives of so many people. Well, one of my highlights was we were able to do something to bless some single moms yesterday, and 7 single moms were able to get their cars repaired. I mean, we're just able to show them love in practical ways. So thank you for constantly blowing me away by the way that you love and serve other people so well. If I wasn't the pastor of this church, I would still come to this church because I love it so much. I want to say hello to those of you who are joining us on Facebook Live. I'm so glad you're with us, and I'm glad that you're with us. This 11:30 service is actually becoming my favorite service. It's the one that, first of all, you're caffeinated, you're awake, you know what I mean? And secondly, it's the one where we have some room to grow. Our first 2 are so full, and so this one we got room to fill up. And so you're my favorite. Some of you have shifted into this service. Thank you for doing that, and let's keep working to reach people for Jesus. I love that. Today, I'm excited. We're kicking off a series called Waymaker, and I'll get into that in just a moment. But we say this all the time here. Sundays are the best day of the week, and I really believe that today is going to be the best day of the week for us, not because we're here, but because the Bible says that whenever 2 or 3 are gathered together in Jesus' name, He's there with us. And so we really do believe that the Waymaker is here, and some of us are going to have our lives completely redirected because of what He does. Hey, one thing before I jump in today is this. We're a worshiping church. Like, I love how we worship God with all of our hearts and with all of our lives. And on 2 Sundays from now, Sunday, October 20th, we're doing something unique and different, something fun. We're calling it Sing Along Sunday, and it's going to be a very different worship experience on purpose. What we're going to do is we're going to strip away all of the extra stuff that comes to worshiping God, and just with our voices and one instrument, we're going to worship as loud and proud as we possibly can. Now, to make it even more fun than that, some of you have been like me, and I'm not super musical, but I've always wanted to record a CD, and we are recording that day, and we'll have it live available on Spotify and other places to stream. And so if you've ever wanted to hear yourself on an album, this is your moment. You were born for this. It's going to be amazing. Now, and some of you are not, that's not going to be good. Hey, we want you to vote, though. Like, we have a lot of songs you can choose from. Go to access.tv/vote and let's pick the songs together. It's going to be amazing. You can literally do that right now. And while you're doing that, you can go on Facebook and you can share this live message with someone who might be joining us from across the computer somewhere across the internet. And that would be amazing. Well, let's do this. Let's get to work today and let's just jump in. I don't know how your family rolls, but one of the things I just love and adore about my family is that it seems like different words become kind of a part of our language, our normal language. Some time ago, my boys started calling each other this funny word, and I don't know where it came from. I don't know where it started. I don't know if they got it at school. I don't know if they made it up. But for some reason, they started calling each other a nub, N-U-B, like you're such a nub. Now, I have no idea why. Can't explain to you what it means. It just kind of means kind of a dummy. You're kind of silly. You're kind of an idiot. Quit being so dumb. Quit being such a nub. It's just this interesting word. And the first few times they said it, I was like, what is wrong with you? What have you been drinking? Like, what is wrong with you? Why are you saying nub? What does that even mean? Now it's a normal word in our household. We call each other nubs. I can't explain it to you. Well, over the summer, my kids went to the library, and when they came home, my son Gavin was beaming with pride in a way that I can't even begin to explain to you. He had hidden in a bag a book that he couldn't wait to show all of us. And he gathers everyone around for a Burns family meeting. This is a big deal. Everyone in. I got to show you, this is a huge surprise. And he opens the bag and he pulls out this book with his smile as big as the state of Texas. The book is called Nubs. And he was so proud of this moment. This book is called Nubs. It's the true story of a mutt, a Marine, and a miracle. And he opens it and he's like, Dad, we got to read this right now. Family gathering, everyone around. Dad, you read the book. So I was like, sure, let's read this book called Nubs, right? Whatever, we'll read it. I turned to page 1. I have a picture of page 1. It says this: outside of a border fort in the desert of western Iraq, a small, thin dog watched and waited. His ears had been cut off. Now, I get to this line, and my wife and my daughter Ella are ugly crying. You know what ugly crying is? It's when you're crying so hard that like snot's coming out of all kinds of places, and they're ugly crying over this. His ears had been cut off to make him a dog of war. And they're like, why would they do that to this puppy? He had no name and no person to call his own. And this is like the worst thing imaginable. Like, my wife has such a tender heart towards animals. If we watched a war movie and a bomb went off and hundreds of people died and one dog got a scratch on it, you know what she would talk about for a week? The poor dog who got a scratch on it. Like, I can't explain it to you. I've got all kinds of stories. One time I was in a very important meeting with this pastor, kind of a big influential person. And I meet with this person and my phone rings and it's Liz, but she knew I was here. So I didn't answer the call. And she called back again a second time, so I didn't answer the call. Third time I thought, someone has died. Like, what do I do? So I answered the call. I'm like, hey babe. And she is again ugly crying on the other side of the phone. And I'm like, what is happening? What's going on? She goes, I was driving and I saw a squirrel. Actually, I saw half of a squirrel because half of it was flat and half of its legs were just kind of like kicking like this. I'm like, what do you say in this moment as the husband? I'm like, great, girl, I love you too. Okay, quit playing, gotta go, love you, and hang up on her. Like, she just loves animals, right? They love animals. So I got my wife crying, I got my daughter Ella ugly crying about this book that was supposed to bring us together as a family, and instead it's torn us apart. And I have this weird moment as a dad. The question is, do I keep reading this story and ruin my child's, like, the rest of their day? Or do I lie and make up a better story for the end of the story? Like, which one do I do? Now, naturally, I chose path B. I made up the rest of the story because I'm not reading this to my kids. And so I'm like, so Nubs was a thin dog that didn't have ears, but you're never going to believe what happened. One day, Nubs was out in the neighborhood doing his thing, and he met a beautiful lady dog, and they got together, they got married, and they had some amazing Nub children. Guess what they named them? Nub, Nub Jr., Nub, Lil Nubs. Everybody was a Nub, Nub. That's what's happening, right? I'm making this up. I'm like, they had a beautiful life together. One day they went to Disney World and Nub got those Mickey ears and put them on his ears, so he finally had ears. It was a miracle. Like, I'm making up this ridiculous, stupid story, and by the end I ended with, and they lived happily ever after, and Nub's ears grew back. It was a miracle. Got like a standing ovation from my family about this story that never really happened. Everybody understand? Now, okay, that's my wife. Anyways, now, I want you to imagine this with me, okay? Have you ever had a moment in your life when you felt like you wish someone could take control of the story and redirect the way the story was going of your life? You ever had a moment like that? You ever had a relationship fall apart, a financial situation just feel like it exploded on you? You ever have a situation at work that feels like the bottom is falling out on you? You ever had a moment like that? And don't you wish there was someone who could take the pen that is authoring the story of your life, and you wish that they could take control and just write a completely different story? Well, what I believe about serving God is this, is that He is the author and the finisher of our faith. He is the author of the story of our life, and He is penning a story through your life. And there are these moments when it feels like the bottom is falling out, when it feels like the weight of the world is too much to bear, and you need something or you need someone to intervene and to change the narrative and to change the direction of the story of your life. If you've ever had that moment, you are in the right place, because we really do believe that God was a miracle worker and that He still is a miracle worker. That God is authoring the story of your life, and He can literally in a moment with His words change the direction and the course of everything in your life. Look how David said it in Psalm chapter 77. David said, "You are the God of miracles and wonders. You're the way maker. You make a way when it seems like there is no way." And then he says, "You still demonstrate your awesome power." Not that you did at one point and that was great for them. He says, you still demonstrate your awesome power. And I believe that this was true 3,000 or 4,000 years ago when he wrote this. And I believe it is still true today in the year 2019, that God is the author and the finisher of our faith, that He is the miracle worker, and that He can do more in a moment in your life than you with 1,000 years of straining and trying. So what would it look like if all of us made this decision this month to lean in and to experience the miracle working power of God? Now, what I want to do today is a little different than what I normally do when I speak. Today, I want to read a long series of verses, 22 verses today. It's really two different stories that, in my opinion, aren't two different stories. It's actually one big story. Now, the stories we're going to read are the story of Jesus feeding the multitude, feeding the 5,000. And then the next story immediately after that in the Bible is the story of Jesus walking on the water. Now, if you grew up in church, these are two of the more popular miracle stories in Jesus' life. The story of the feeding of the 5,000 is literally in all four of the the Gospels. If you grew up in church, you've probably heard this at some point in your life or another. It's this beautiful story, but it's not two separate stories, and I want to show you the reason. I believe that we have two different miracles, but in the middle, there's this moment that many of us find ourselves in, and I want to talk about what to do in the middle of your miracles. Mark chapter 6 says this. It says, the apostles gathered around Jesus, and they reported to him all that they had done and taught. Then because so many people were coming and going that they did not even have a chance to eat, important detail, he said to them, come with me by yourselves to a quiet place and get some rest. So they went away by themselves in a boat to a solitary place, but many who saw them leaving recognized them and ran over on foot from all over the towns and got there ahead of them. When Jesus landed and saw a large crowd, he had compassion on them because they were like sheep without a shepherd. So he began teaching them many things. By this time it was late in the day, so his disciples came to him. They said, this is a remote place. Send the people away so they can go to the surrounding countryside and villages and buy themselves something to eat. They're hungry. But he answered them, this is frustrating. Jesus goes, well, you give them something to eat. And they said to him, that would take more than half a year's wages. Are we to go and spend that much on bread to give it to them to eat? How many loaves do you have? He asked them. Go and see. And when they found out, they said, we have 5 and we have 2 fish. Then Jesus directed them to have all the people sit down in groups on the green grass. And so they sat down in groups of hundreds and 50s. Taking the 5 loaves and the 2 fish and looking to heaven, notice 2 things. He gave thanks and he broke the bread. And it goes on. Then he gave them to his disciples to distribute to the people. He also divided the 2 fish among them all as well. They all ate and they were satisfied. And the disciples picked up 12 basketfuls. Interesting number. We'll talk about that in a moment. 12 basketfuls of broken bread. The number of the men who had eaten that day was 5,000. Now pause here for just a moment. So Jesus does this amazing miracle. He feeds the 5,000 people with just one little kid's lunch. And then the next word is this prepositional word. It changes from one story to the next. In your Bible, it might be separated by paragraphs with a new header on top that says, Jesus walks on water. But literally the next word ties these 2 stories together because it says immediately. It's like this story happened and then like moments after that, immediately after that, Jesus made his disciples get into the boat and go on ahead of him to Bethsaida while he dismissed the crowd. After leaving them, he went up on a mountainside to pray. Later that night, the boat was in the middle of the lake and he was alone on land. And he saw the disciples straining at the oars. They were working really hard and they couldn't get through. But shortly before dawn, he went out to them walking on the lake. He was about to pass by them, which I've always thought is a funny detail in the story. They're working as hard as they can, thinking they're going to die. And Jesus just walks by and like throws up a peace sign and keeps walking by. It says, but when they saw him walking on the lake, they thought he was a ghost and they cried out because they all saw him and they were terrified, which wouldn't you do the same thing? Immediately he spoke to them and said, take courage, it is I, don't be afraid. Then he climbed in the boat with them and the wind died down and they were completely amazed. And this is so important, this ties the 2 stories together, for they had not understood about the loaves. Not about the storm, not about the waves, not about him walking on the water. They hadn't understood about the bread and their hearts were hardened. Now, to understand these stories, you really have to understand them together. And let's talk through the whole story and talk about what God has for all of us as a result. It says this, that the disciples were out teaching and they come back to Jesus to report what they'd been teaching on. It's like they understood that authority is only authority when it's under authority. Even the strongest, greatest leader in the world is under the authority of God. So everyone is under authority. So they come back to Jesus and they're like, is what we're teaching good? Like, are we doing the right thing? And Jesus blesses them and says, of course it is. And it drops this little detail on us that's found 2 times in the book of Mark. They were hungry. The disciples, they'd been so busy teaching that they hadn't had anything to eat. So after the teaching was over, Jesus tries to help them and he sends them on a boat across the Sea of Galilee. Now, I was there just a few months ago there in Israel. The Sea of Galilee is relatively small. I mean, you can literally see from one side to the other, and he puts them on a boat to get them away from the crowds and he pushes them off and they're on their way across the lake. But it says that these people saw them and they recognized them as people who had been with Jesus and they knew that Jesus was always with them. And so if they were going across the lake, Jesus would certainly be by soon. And there's this huge, unique detail about them. It says that they were so enamored by Jesus that they took off running around the lake to be at the place where Jesus would be. Now, I love this about the people because it shows that in their heart, there was a certain level of expectation. If we can just get to where Jesus is, maybe Jesus will heal us. Maybe Jesus will say something about God that's so different and so unique. Maybe something will happen in our lives. It's like their hearts were full of expectation. You need to get this. The level of expectation that we have when it comes to God really determines the level that we will receive from God. I challenge you to come to church a little differently. I challenge you to get here and just set your heart in motion of God. I expect that you're going to change me. I expect that you're going to do something dramatic in my life. Our level of expectation sets the level that we're able to receive from God. I also love this other detail. These people seem to know that miracles happened in the presence of Jesus. Now look, you need to know something about me. I'm an on-time person. Like, I'm the kind of person that if I'm 5 minutes early, I feel like I'm running late. I feel this sense of nervousness if I don't leave on time to get to a place on time. I know not everybody's wired in that same way. I have friends, I have employees that work for me that if they're 10 minutes late, they feel like they're good and they feel like they're on time. 15 to 20 minutes late feels like I'm just running a couple minutes behind. Like, that's how they tend to roll, you know? I understand that everyone's not wired the same way. I don't understand how everyone's not wired the same way, though, when it comes to church. You say, why? Because when we worship God, when we sing of his praises, when we're in the literal presence of God, that is the breeding ground for miracles. It's like, why wouldn't you be on time for that? It's like people think to themselves, I've had people say to me before, man, as long as I get here by the fourth song, I'll be good. I just want to hear you. Me? Get out of here. I don't want to hear me. This isn't about me. It's never been about me. It's always been about him. Well, I don't really like the worship songs. Hey, good news. We're not worshiping you, right? It's not about you. Not about you. So don't neglect the presence of God. Like, do whatever it takes. You can get to school on time. You can get to work on time. There's no more important place to be on time than to be in the presence of God. Listen, I've got extra time because this is the last service. I grew up where we scheduled vacations around not missing church. Why? Because that's where the presence of God met his people. When 2 or 3 gather in Jesus' name, he is there with them, right? Come on, so let's make this a priority. Make the presence of God a priority in your life. They expected something, and I believe that they received something. Now, you need to understand that to this point in Jesus' ministry, he hadn't done any really big public miracles yet. He'd turned water to wine, healed a few people, but this miracle of the feeding of the 5,000 this is the one that put Jesus on the map. Like, when you fill the bellies of really what is more like 15 or 20,000 people, when they leave full from the miracle that Jesus did, everyone is going to hear about Jesus, but they all show up, and it says that Jesus, he sees these people, and he uses this language that they're like sheep without a shepherd, and his heart is filled with compassion for them, so he starts to teach them. And his disciples have this kind of panicked moment of like, oh no, we haven't eaten yet. And when he starts teaching, he's great, but he teaches like all day long, right? And so we got to do something. And so the disciples do this really passive aggressive thing. Instead of going and saying, hey, Jesus, listen, can we like leave you alone for 30 minutes and grab something to eat? We'll come back. Instead of doing that, they go and they blame the people. Jesus, the people. Don't worry, this isn't about us. We could listen to you teach all day. You are the man, right? This is not about us. But the people, I think they're hungry, and we need to make sure they get something to eat. And listen, why don't we just like do a 15-minute, like a little mini devotional, and we'll dismiss them. They can get to McDonald's and Chick-fil-A before it's Sunday. They can get there, like we'll get whatever they need, right? But Jesus says this, instead of saying, yes, fine, we'll do that, Jesus responds back with, no, you give them something to eat. You. Now, we said this earlier, there's 5,000 men in this crowd. In that day and in that culture, when you count numbers, you'd only count men. Scholars believe that if you accounted for women and children, which you should account for women and children because they're people and they matter to God, if you count them, likely would have had 15 to 20,000 people. For some context, the Orlando Amway Center, where the Orlando Magic play basketball, it seats 20,000 people. Okay, so imagine that many people are on the mountainside. Jesus is teaching with the Sea of Galilee to his back, and Jesus says to these disciples that are hungry, wanting food, he says, you give them something to eat. Now, if you hear this the wrong way, you miss the whole story. If you think Jesus is saying to them, you have to do it, that misses the whole point altogether. What Jesus is asking is, what do you have available to you? So often what we do when we go to God is we say, I have nothing. You have to intervene. And God's like, well, what do you have in your hands? What is available to you? You need to understand this principle. The ingredients for a miracle are always in our midst. Like, we have everything we need at our fingertips for God to do a miracle in our lives. They just are. So they go looking around for food. Now, you need to understand this. There's 15, 20,000 people here. And if you know the story, they get one little boy's lunch, 5 pieces of bread, 2 fish. It's like a Long John Silver's number 6. You know, that's all they got. But do you think that was all the food that was there that day? You think 20,000 people and literally one kid showed up with the meal? No chance whatsoever. And to make it even more unique, the meal that came from the person came from a kid who was uncounted. Like it didn't matter. And who do you think packed the meal that day? Like literally, who packed it? Probably his mom, because in that culture, like the men, they were the kings of the house and they didn't literally do anything. So the mom probably packed the meal. Do you think the mom got up that day and thought that her ordinary routine of what she was doing was literally the beginning and the recipe for a miracle? It wasn't. She was just doing what she did. Like God takes your ordinary and makes it extraordinary. He takes your natural and makes it supernatural. So she takes this little boy's lunch, she packs it and sends it with him, and the boy, he takes what he has and he gives it. Now, we don't know the story. We're reading between the lines, but like, why didn't anyone else step up? I think sometimes we think that, God, I don't have the ability to serve you, and really all that God is after is your availability. Like, will you use what you have to make a difference for him? Like, will you do that? So this little boy's lunch, and it's given to the disciples. They take it to Jesus, and I just think that probably when they go to Jesus, what they're thinking is this: it's impossible. It's not possible. 20,000 people, we got 5 pieces of bread and 2 fish. This won't even feed the 12 disciples, much less 20,000 people. We can't possibly do this. One of the disciples did the mental math in his head and he's like, this will take half a year's worth of money of salary. So figure your salary, cut it in half. One of the disciples is like, it'll take that much money to feed everybody. We're not going to do it. If we take this to Jesus, now Jesus will know that we don't have enough. We have lack. We do not have enough. And they bring this little boy's meal to Jesus. And Jesus sees it, and now Jesus is faced with the impossible. Now, this is a big deal. You need to understand this. So often when it comes to asking God for a miracle, we're asking God for the wrong stuff. So what do you mean by that? I think there's a difference between miracles and management stuff. So sometimes we'll say things like, God, I need you to bless my finances. Please bless my finances. Well, are you managing what he's already given you? Are you living within your means? Are you putting God first and bringing to God the 10% that belongs to him, which is called a tithe? Are you honoring him in that way? If not, don't ask God for a miracle which you're not managing. God, I need you to bless my health. I need you to take care of me. Roll down your window. I'll take a triple cheeseburger, double fries, right? And I'm not going to exercise. Forget that, right? But God, I need a miracle. Help my cholesterol. God's like, salad, exercise. It's a management issue. I just wonder for how many of us we're going to God with management issues when really miracles are reserved for God. You say, why does this even matter? Because if you can do it on your own, God doesn't get the credit for it. But when it's a miracle is something that only God can do. In fact, I would say it to you like this: impossible is where God begins. When you reach your end, that's where God starts. That's where the miracles begin. Look what Jesus even said in the book of Matthew chapter 19. He said, with man, this is impossible. With God, all things are possible. So God specializes in the impossible. Takes this little boy's lunch, and then, do you remember the sequence of events? He takes this little boy's lunch. It says he lifts it to heaven, and what's the first thing he does with what was given to him? He gives thanks. Now, this is a big deal, because I think sometimes when we approach our lack and when we approach our need, we curse our lack instead of thanking God for what we have. So we curse our lack. God, I don't have enough. How can you bless me? I don't even have enough to pay my bills. I don't even have enough time to get my work done, much less take care of my family and meet my needs. God, I never have enough. This house is too small. My job is too constricting. I'll never get out of this situation. He is distant. She doesn't love me. My kids don't care about me. I don't have anything. And we go to God and we present him with all of our lack, but we're cursing our lack because it's never enough. What we don't understand is our lack is actually the seed that God wants to use to multiply into the fields of harvest that are our blessing. Jesus starts by blessing it. What if instead of cursing that little house that you live in, you thank God for a roof over your head and providing for you to this point? Like the God who's been faithful will be faithful when you stop complaining about the stuff that he's already blessed you with, okay? So he starts by giving thanks. Can you thank God for your lack in the seasons of lack? He thanks God for it. And then he does something else. He thanks God and he breaks it. And he gives the disciples back less than what they originally started with. Now I need you to understand a principle, okay? 2 principles. Number 1 is God never asked anyone to do everything. He never did. He just asks everyone to do something. God never asks you to do everything that's required for you to achieve the purposes and plans in your life that he has for you. But he asks you to do something with what you have. Jesus takes the little bit that's there and he blesses it, breaks it, and gives it back. The second principle is this, is that God uses brokenness as the catalyst in our life to achieve the things in our life. Sometimes we look at our history and we think, well, God can't use me because I'm so broken. What if brokenness was actually the prerequisite to God actually using you? What if brokenness was the thing that God used in your life to launch you into the life that he has for you? I think we're so used to hiding our scars, hiding our pain, feeling like God can't possibly use me because of how broken I am. God actually uses the places of brokenness to be the tools that he uses to help other people. It's surprising how this works. This week I was reading a news story on Apple News, and I randomly ran across this article on this ancient Japanese form of art. People would take broken pieces of pottery, pieces of plaster that were broken, and they would repair them, but instead of repairing them with normal glue or cement and then painting over it, here's what they would do. They would mix precious metals like gold or silver or platinum in the cement composition, and when they fixed it, here's what it would look like. These broken pieces would actually highlight the brokenness. You know what happened when these people came up with this? This word is this Japanese art form. It's called kintsugi. Kint literally means gold, and suji means repair. So what he's saying is they would take gold or silver or platinum, and they would literally highlight the pieces of brokenness. These pieces that at one point were deemed priceless because of the brokenness in them were now invaluable. They're the most unbelievably valuable pieces there in Japan. Why? Because someone understood the principle that brokenness can actually be beautiful when it's seen through a different lens. God sees your brokenness as the launching pad for the miracle to happen. So here's what happens. Jesus takes it, gives thanks for it, breaks it, gives them back what they have, and then I want you to notice where the miracle happens. It doesn't happen in Jesus' hand. The miracle happens in the disciples' hand. Now, I've taught this before. One of the things I believe so much about money and giving is this. I believe that this is what tithing is. God never asked one person to carry the whole financial weight of a church or missions around the world. He invites all of us to do our part, to bring him back the first 10%. So we give thanks. God, you gave me everything that I have. I'm giving you 10%. It's like God takes it and breaks it and gives us back 90% and says, now here, live with this. But the 90% is going to be blessed. Watch what happens when it's blessed. It multiplies. Miracles happen in it. In the same way, the miracle happens there in the disciples' hand. Jesus takes it, gives thanks, breaks it, and gives it back to them. And the miracle happens in their hands, and they feed all these people. 5, 10, 15, 20,000 people are fed. This miracle happens, and then there's 12 baskets full left over. Now, why is this significant? It's not just because there was 12 disciples, so each one got their own doggy bag. It's not this. It's that I believe that Jesus understood the storm the disciples were going to be sent into, and he wanted them to have a reminder of the miracle working power that he had. I think for some of us, we leave one miracle and we leave all traces of remembrance of it behind in that season of our life. Has God done a miracle in your life? Well, if you've made the decision to follow Jesus, he saved you from life apart from God, eternity separated from him in a literal place called hell. He literally took you from death to life. Has God done a miracle in your life? Yeah, he made a way to God. He made a way for you to spend eternity with him. He's the way maker. Has God healed you? Has God healed a relationship? Has God mended a broken heart in your life? Has God done any miracle in your life? And what Jesus understood in this moment, that word immediately in verse 45, what he understands here is if we're not careful, what'll happen is we'll leave the old miracles in the past and we'll forget them. And Jesus sends them with this trace of memory. He sends them with these doggy bags full of leftovers. In my mind, when I read it without understanding that, I think, why would he do this? I don't love leftovers. I don't love eating leftover food. If I was the disciples, I'd let's send this back with the 5,000 people. And Jesus, if we run out of food, you could just do one of those magic tricks again and you could just make more for us, right? That's new, fresh food. But I think Jesus wanted them to have the memory, the physical representation of the miracle that had happened in the past. But then a storm happens. Now, how often does this happen to us? God's been good. He's been faithful. He's provided. He's taken care of us. He's healed us. He's saved us. He's mended our brokenness. And we find ourselves immediately, like verse 45 says, in another storm. The storms come. And the disciples are panicking in this moment. I have heard just through historians that Sea of Galilee has some of the nastiest storms on earth because of how deep the sea is and how high the mountains are. So what happens is the cold air comes across the top of the mountains and it meets with the warm air from the depth of the sea level, and there's nasty, terrible storms. Jesus knows this is going to happen because he is, God, and he sends them out into the storm because in the storm it's revealed who you actually are and what you actually believe. So they're there on this boat freaking out, and I said it earlier, I love the detail that Jesus, he just comes casually strolling by like you do. You ever seen anybody walk on water? No. Jesus comes walking by and he throws up deuces and keeps walking, and they're like, whoa, 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 whoa. Jesus gets in the boat. When he gets in the boat, the storm ceases, and he reveals to them something beautiful, that he is the God that can provide, and he's also the God over nature itself. There was this ancient belief in first century Jerusalem that the only way to prove that you were God would to be God over nature, right? Anybody can do a magic trick and fake, do sleight of hand, but to control nature would prove that you are actually God. And so Jesus proves that he's the God of provision. And also in this moment, he provides them this belief system that he is the God over nature itself. That whatever life seems to throw at you when you're in the middle of a storm, you can be reminded that God is both good and will provide and take care of you in one season. And when you find yourself facing another storm, who will be there? The Waymaker himself. So what would it look like if you find yourself today in a storm in life, completely confused by what is happening in life, if you just reminded your soul that the Waymaker who made a way in the past for you will always be there with you in the middle of your storms? I think it changes everything. How differently could you live if you understood that he's been with you and he's been faithful, and he'll be with you and he will be faithful? That the greatest indicator of future performance is past performance. And if he's been faithful and if he's been good, he will be good. So what would it look like if all of us just made this decision today to leave here and to walk out with a holy sense of confidence? This sense that the Waymaker who is with us will be with us. That he's the one who makes a way when it seems like there is no way. And when you find yourself at the end of your rope, at the end of your stream, at the end of all of your strength, you can find yourself in a place of impossibility. And instead of seeing that as the end of the rope, you see it as the beginning of God. That impossibility is the launching pad for miracles. So what would it look like if all of us bought into this idea, hook, line, and sinker? God, you are good. You are my Father, and you are the Waymaker who makes a way when there is no way. Look, I have no idea what you brought in today. This week was a challenging week for me as a pastor. I had some people just feel like they were completely at the end of all of their strength come to me. And I just had this sense rise up in my soul that this is the moment that God gets to flex. This is the moment he gets to show up, right? If you can't fix it on your own, it requires him to step in. If you could fix it on your own, you wouldn't need God, but you need him. He's the Waymaker. What did you bring in today? What pain, what hurt, what sickness, what disease, what lack, what insecurity? What did you bring in today that you feel like you need someone to make a way where there is no way? Would you do this? Would you just take your hands and open them up to God like this? And in your own heart, in your own mind, just think, what is that thing, that place that you find yourself at a place of impossibility where only the Waymaker can make a way? Just hold that out and say, God, today we give this to you. Some of us have reached our wits' ends. We've reached the end of our rope, the end of our road. We can't do anything else without you. God, I thank you that impossible isn't impossible for you. Impossible is actually the starting point for you. So God, you make a way where there was no way. You step in, you intervene, you do what only you can do, and we trust you for it. In Jesus' name.